just shows you as heavy as I was.
It's called acanthosis.
18+% of our children right now are obese.
How loud are you?
About 280.
If you go with the flow in America today, you will end up overweight or obese, as 2/3 of Americans do.
I don't want to be fat for the rest of my life. I've got diabetes,
Sleep apnea.
high blood pressure.
I get dizzy when I get up.
Everything's hurting now.
You don't crave broccoli, and our generation has grown up craving a Big Mac.
We have built a cheap food model, and that's the one we're dealing with right now.
It's so hard to combat against what the TV's telling you about your kids.
The kind of food that we eat is the kind that's most profitable.
Local and regional foods taste better.
The weight of the nation is out of control, but we can fix that.
How do you like the market?
Market mean everything for this neighborhood.
We have got to come together as a country and really make this a priority.
As long as we stick together, that's what it's about.
It's not only health, it's about survival and well-being of the United States as a nation.
The reason we have government in the first place is to solve problems collectively that we can't solve individually.
If we don't now take this as a really serious, urgent national priority, we are, all of us individually and as a nation, going to pay a really serious price.
I weighed 99 pounds when my husband and I got married 30 years ago. Then you start having a family, and after my second child, it was like poof, and it was my grandmother, my mother, my sister, and myself. It's been the same story. It's not easy to take weight off. And that's liposuction, patches, pills, fad diets, counting carbs, counting calories. I've tried it all. And I've asked my husband, let's be honest here, am I that big? And when he doesn't answer me, I think, oh my God, what has happened to me? You know, or if he says, no way, then I feel better about myself, you know, but the ones that he don't answer, I know I'm that big, and it's like a slap in the face. Wake up, you know, do something. You try, and it doesn't, and you lose hope then.
Bogalusa is just like any town throughout the southeastern United States. And there's some variations. You get rural in northern Mississippi, is really a lot of poverty and so forth. And it partly relates to the industry and agriculture. But we're just like any old country town.
It's strawberries and cheese and...
No,
what
it's not
Cindy
strawberry.
told
It's
us about it.
strawberry jello, and
Yeah.
it's got bananas and pineapple, and you would not believe how good it
Get
is.
your plates, start eating. This is Louisiana cooking. This is Louisiana at its best. Where's the shrimp pasta? You get tired of the diet that's not going to work. And then you fall off the wagon, so to speak, and then you really pig out on something you're not supposed to have. Or, you get tired of that feeling of failure. If you don't fry it, you grill it. If you don't grill it, you boil it. That's the way we eat down here.
Good morning.
Hello.
Hi, what's the name?
Cindy and Gary Roach.
Cindy, you're going to be first. Gary's going to be second. Good. And just have a seat.
When did you start coming to the hard study?
We were in grammar school.
Grammar
Both
school.
of us.
I want to say about the third
Third,
grade.
fourth, fifth grade.
Fourth grade.
Kathy Pike.
Kathy, when did you start coming through screening?
I started heart study. My first year was in 1973. I was in kindergarten.
The Bogalusa Heart Study is a landmark investigation of the genesis of cardiovascular disease from childhood right through adulthood. And many of us, as we came up through our biomedical sciences in undergraduate university, we learned about the Bogalusa Heart Study. The main focus is on cardiovascular disease and the pathogenesis of disease over time, really starting in childhood.
I'm going home, home to Bogalusa. I'm going home, home to Bogalusa. I'm going home, I'm on my way.
In the Bogalusa Heart Study, we're looking at risk factors in children. Since we want to look at the early natural history, it's obvious that we ought to look at the early onset of these diseases.
When I hit Bogalusa, I'll be home to stay.
The major effect of the Bogalusa Heart Study is the biannual general examination of all school children in Bogalusa.
I can remember being very excited when they used to come to the school. They used to come, it was a big white trailer, and that's where they did all of your work. And back then I was just happy because we were getting out of class.
When I got the heart study, the intention was to look at risk factors, just like Framingham, but to do it in children. What I need is a list of the people that you don't have any kind of record on.
Some of them we have because we knew the cause, we just didn't have the death certificate.
So you've exhausted all the data from the coroner's office.
Yes, sir.
After we had been in the study 5 or 6 years, we clearly established that heart disease began in childhood. What clinched our information was doing an autopsy study. $560 deaths since 1972. When we began to see lesions in kids, it really gelled the fact that looking at risk factors clinically in life, and here looking at the actual vascular disease and death, and having a strong correlation, highly significant relationships.
Stand straight. All right, take a breath.
Our children are now 50 years old, and we have a 30, 35-year history on them.
Could you give us your email address?
It's the only study like that in the world that has long-term black-white population. The obesity that we're seeing is very damaging to the cardiovascular system.
I just found out that I have high blood pressure. And they said that I was on the borderline with maybe diabetes. So my doctor told me to go brown. So no more white rice or potatoes or white bread. So we've gone to like wheat pasta, wheat bread, that type of thing.
Okay. All right. What did you get for the subscapula? 132.9. Another hug. And 133.
Obesity is not just fat cells sitting there, but particularly the central fat, the abdominal fat, the android deposition, the male deposition of fat, the waist measurement.
This is to measure the abdomen.
But it's the obesity which is the major driving force for insulin resistance. Insulin resistance and obesity are the driving force for hypertension, diabetes.
Okay, thank you. The blood pressure was
140 over is high. If you lost 20 pounds, it might go to normal.
Well, I am working on that.
But
I've lost
you ought to be on some medicine. I don't care. You ought to be on some medicine.
I'll go back and see a doctor.
That's good.
Hey, Sandy, how are you?
I'm fine. You doing okay, Miss Rita?
I'm doing fine.
Found a
You ready
picture
for
of you
this?
morning? I found out through heart study I had high blood pressure. And I can take that to the doctor.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. That's all we need.
My grandmother had a heart attack. Both my grandmothers. I'm sorry. But I know going through heart study that if something is wrong, it's going to be caught early on. And maybe I'll be here to see my grandkids grow up. I've got to learn to eat the right things at the right times. And I'm going to try it. I'm going to give it a shot. And come back and y'all see maybe a new me. Thank y'all.
Life is really hard for people who are obese. And by hard, I mean both the social consequences of that and the health consequences of that. Right down to the fact that those who are very obese are not going to live as long as others. What makes me frustrated, bordering on angry, is that this is preventable. This is not one of those unfortunate acts of nature that we just have to accept as reality. This is not the product of a tsunami.
The weight of the nation is not healthy. And to get it healthy, we're all going to have to do our part. All of us have to be part of the solution to reduce obesity in this country. Otherwise, we're going to be faced with steadily increasing healthcare costs and the lives that are lost from cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and other problems.
How many people in this society are able to maintain a healthy weight? A third or less. Something's wrong with this picture.
Levels of obesity in the United States have increased in alarming ways. In the 1980s, the Centers for Disease Control began putting together a map showing levels of obesity state by state, and then they went through the years. And every time a state changes colors, it suggests increasing levels of obesity.
When you look at the rates of adult obesity from 1960 until 2008, you can see that the rates were moderate and relatively consistent over time. But then starting in the 1980s, we saw a rapid increase resulting in the current level, which is fully over a third of adult men and women in the United States are obese. But it's the morbid obesity where we've seen the most striking increase from 1988 until 2008.
We have childhood obesity at levels where people aren't denying it anymore. So it is a teachable moment. When it was only adults or only people in less valued groups, you could put it aside. It's those people. But when it's children, you can get a conversation going.
People who are poorer tend to have higher rates of obesity. So if you look back in the late 1980s and early 1990s, there's a linear relationship between poverty and obesity. But if you look more recently, from 2005 to 2008, everybody's rates have gone up. And being wealthier is not nearly as protective against obesity as it used to be.
There is some regional variation, but it's all different degrees of terrible. The levels are so high everywhere that every state has to pay attention to this issue. The healthcare costs, not to mention the human burden, are very high in every corner of this country and increasingly every corner of the world.
Obesity is an enormously complex problem with inputs from several places. Genetics is one. We know that about 60 to 70% of the risks of obesity are heritable ones.
When it comes to obesity, for the vast majority of people, there's no one gene that makes a difference. There's many, many genes, dozens, perhaps hundreds, each of which has a small effect on the obesity in the population, but which add up to a susceptibility when exposed to this environment we live in for getting more overweight or not.
There are a large number of genes that have been identified in humans that do play a role in the control of body weight. And very interestingly, the majority of these genes are genes that influence food intake. Obesity is a classic example of what we call a gene by environment interaction. Any individual's body weight, in most instances, is a result of the interaction of their genetic makeup with the environment that they happen to be living in.
There's no doubt that genetics, the DNA that we inherit from our parents, affects how much we weigh. There's also no doubt that the environment we live in affects how much we weigh. There's no nature versus nurture. There's nature and nurture.
Both nature, by that we mean genes, and nurture, we mean experience, affect each other, and they're inextricably intertwined. Is there a genetic predisposition to obesity? Absolutely. Is obesity caused by environment and behavior? Absolutely.
I've been interested in obesity for a long time, but now I'm responsible for a city of 8.3 million people. Every one of those people I consider to be my patient as a doctor. And of all the health problems I deal with, this is the one problem that's getting worse, obesity and diabetes.
This shows the diabetes and the obesity in the South Bronx here.
The lowest income county in New York State, very high prevalence of obesity, very high rates of diabetes. Just a short distance away here in Manhattan, the Upper East Side, where it's the highest income neighborhood in the city, we have very low prevalence of obesity, very low prevalence of diabetes. Obesity is driving the epidemic of diabetes.
In the darkest areas on this map, close to 90% of adults are overweight or obese.
You do have to literally start connecting some of these dots. 57% of the kids in Philadelphia are overweight or obese. You on this playground? Okay. We have serious diabetes problems, obesity, especially with our children, and they just need more options right here in the community, right on the avenue.
We already know, based on the information from the Center for Disease Control and many others, that for kids living in these neighborhoods, many of them will die before their parents.
A child born in 2000 has a 1 in 3 lifetime chance of having diabetes. If that child is African American or Latino, it's 1 in 2.
The red spots are where the highest rates of poverty are.
In this area, almost 1 out of every 3 children is considered to be overweight or obese. And this is an area, as you were saying, with poverty, the average household income is less than $25,000 for a family of 4.
If you look at the state of Tennessee and Nashville, it is a crisis level here. I mean, we rank at the bottom.
If we don't take on strategies that affect how the low-income community is dealing with the obesity epidemic, we're going to see this phenomenon across our society in a relatively short period of time.